Hey, Joke from chokehub.com here. So I decided that I was going to create this video series on object-oriented programming in PHP. And I released the OOP Basics video earlier today. And it was short enough that I thought that it merited a follow-up video to be released today as well. And so that's what this video is the second video. And this one is all about classes and objects. Now, classes and objects are a key part of object-oriented programming when it comes to PHP. If you're directly here, then the video assumes that you have basic knowledge of OOP. If you're a beginner for OOP or you don't have good confidence on the basics of what classes and objects are, then please do go and watch the OOP Basics video that I put together. Now, classes in PHP. The concept of a class was introduced in PHP 4, but complete coverage of a class like access modifier or interface was introduced in PHP 5. Creating a class is super simple in PHP. You create a class with the help of using the class keyword. So here is an example of just a basic class here. We have class myOwnClass that's created by using the class keyword. When you're naming a class, it will generally be just a string with no spaces. I try to follow what I have here, which is called camel case, where your first word is lowercase and each subsequent word is uppercase. After that, we have our highlighted brackets, and these complete the block of the class. Everything within the class will be in between these two brackets. All variables within the class are defined at the very beginning. Now, variables starting with the var keyword, as you see here, var variable 1. Now, from PHP 5 and on, you can declare variables using its level of visibility. For example, if you want to declare variable 1 to be accessible from anywhere, then we can use public variable 1 instead of var variable 1. If you use the var variable 1, as I do here in PHP 5, the variable will be treated as public by default. The next part is the function declaration of your class. In this example, you can see that we can directly declare functions as function merge variable. It is a very basic creation of a function within our class, and the support for this is from PHP 4. In PHP 5, we can apply visibility on the function too. We use the same visibility modifiers that we do for variables. So in PHP 5, we would create public function merge variable. If you don't define visibility factors using PHP 5, by default, the function will also be treated as public. Now, when working with PHP 5, I do recommend always using a visibility modifier. It makes your classes easier to read, and you know exactly what is public and what is private. So here we have an example of the exact same class, but on the PHP 5 class methods. So the basic architecture of PHP 4 and PHP 5 classes almost the exact same, except for the use of the visibility. We will use visibility in depth in a later video. For now, just think that visibility is access factor of your class's methods and variables. If you want your object to allow access of your variable or function, then make it public. If you do not want your object to access methods and properties, then make it private. You can directly pass value to your class from the class function parameter as well. Function of the class always work like general functions in PHP. For example, here we have the exact same class again on the PHP 5 method. The only difference that you can see here is in my function I have the ability to pass through a third variable. Now, it's important to note that you cannot create a class name with std class in PHP. This is a reserved class for PHP. Std class represents a standard object. It is used to create an empty object. You can use it without creating it, but if you try to forcefully create the class with the name std class, PHP will throw a fatal error saying that you cannot redeclare class std class. Okay? Now, when you're creating functions in your classes or methods, it's recommended to not create a function of the class starting with 2 underscores. Okay? Now, the reason why is because a function started with 2 underscores is like a magic function in PHP. And we'll go into magic functions in another video. Now, you cannot break your class into several files, but within your class function, you can break it up into multiple files. And that's it's kind of weird. It's like I'm saying that you can't, but you can. And there's a reason for that. Now, in PHP, this is illegal. We have our class declaration. We create our variable. We create a function that returns our variable, and then we try to include. With my IDE, if I hover over the error, it tells me I have an unexpected include. Okay? This is not allowed in PHP. But if we just reposition the include statement to being inside the function, then it's completely legal. Alright? So when you're creating a class, take care to make note of this practice. Alright? If you have to include something, include it within a function, not outside of it, as in for here. Okay? Now, objects in PHP. Objects are nothing without classes. Classes are virtually useless without objects. Right? An object is an instance of your class. So if you have a class, then you need to create an object of that class in order to solve your problem using that class. You can create an object of your class by using the new keyword, such as object class equals new my class. Okay? Now, when creating object of class my class in a variable object class, now we can also create multiple instances of an object of the same class, and every object differs from the other. Kind of like so. So we have object class 1 equals my own class, and object class 2 equals my own class. It's two instances of the same class, but each one has their own properties. To completely understand the object, let's create a full class and their object. Here we'll create a class for interest calculation. All right, and I've already written this. As you can see, I've already written the code for everything in this video. So we've created our little mini class. We have rate, duration, and capital, and then our calculate interest method, right? And then we instantiate two instances of this class into variables calculator 1 and calculator 2. We set all of the required parameters for each one, and then we call the method calculate interest on both of the variables. And here, finally, I echo out just some basic information. Now, if you pull this up in the browser, you're going to see two messages. And they'll say something like your interest on capital 300 with rate of 3 for duration 2 is 18. And then the second one, your interest on capital 400 with rate 3.2 for duration 3 is 38.4. Okay. So let's analyze this code carefully. We've created two objects of the interest calculator class in variables calculator 1 and calculator 2, right? Now, the property value of both objects are completely different. For example, calculator 1's capital is 300, whereas calculator 2's capital is 400. So whenever you call calculate interest function on either object, then they will calculate interest on their own properties. Okay? So now let's look at the interest calculator class itself. We find that the class has three variables or properties: rate, duration, and capital. Now, in the calculate interest function or method, we have used the variable this, right? Right here. This. Okay, this variable is a system-defined object variable of the class. This is an object of self-class in the current context. For both objects of interest calculator class, this object is different. When you have object calculator 1, then this rate is 3, and in case of calculator 2, this rate is 3.2. Okay, now what if we add variable rate equals 5 right inside the function? Okay, in this example, this variable of rate and this variable of rate are two completely separate variables. Okay, and since our return uses this rate, it will always be the value of what we set here or here. But if we remove this from it, now no matter what we set here, our rate will always be 5. Now with PHP, you can create objects of the class in some different ways also. Here we will see a couple of different ways. The first way, you assign the class name to a variable, and then you instantiate on the variable name with the parentheses after. And since 5.3, you've been able to do this one, where you instantiate an object the exact same way as you normally would. So class 1 equals new interest calculator. Then you can do class 2 equals new class 1. Okay. Now let's talk about constructors of classes and objects. A constructor is basically nothing but a function defined in your PHP class. A constructor function is automatically called when you create the object of the class. As soon as you write variable object equals new your class, your constructor function of the class will be executed. Now in PHP 4, you can create a constructor by creating the function with the same name of your class. But in PHP 5, you can also create a constructor by defining the magic function construct. So it's 2 underscores construct. All right. So here we are looking at a PHP 4 version, and this does work in PHP 5 as well. Okay. And here we are looking at a PHP 5 version. You notice the key difference between the two is the function name. Function interest calculator here in the PHP 4 version, whereas it's public function underscore underscore construct in the PHP 5 version. Now, in both of these, whenever an instance of the class is created, rate will be set to 3 and duration will be set to 4. The difference is in the way of calling the constructor. In PHP 4, you were limited to creating a constructor by creating a function with the same name of the class. In PHP 5, you can create a function with the same name or use the underscore underscore construct to create a constructor of the class. Now you can also pass parameters into the constructor. Kind of like this, right? If we've created a parameter in a constructor, we need to pass value for them at the time of object creation, such as down here, object class new interest calculator 3.2, 7. That sets our rate to 3.2 and our duration to 7. If not, if you do not set those, PHP will throw an error. So keep an eye on that. Now, let's play a little with visibility and other features of the constructor. Okay. All implementations described here are considered only for PHP 5. Did you notice I've created my constructor function using public? And the reason why is because it is accessible from the outside of the class, and it has to be. This function is executed when we are creating our object. So PHP will always throw an error if you create a constructor private. Okay? And it doesn't matter if it's this version or this version. This version or this version. Okay? If you try to set the constructor to private, you will get a call to private interest calculator construct from invalid context fatal error from PHP. Okay? So, never set your constructor to private. Your constructor is one of the only functions that absolutely has to be a public function. Let's think about this for a minute. So, we can define a constructor either by creating a function with the same name of the class or by creating one with the magic construct function, right? Now, what happens if we use both of them in a single class? So here we have both of them in a single class, and this here should be return. Okay, so here we have our class test with a public function construct returning 1 and our function test returning 2. We do t equals new test. Okay, if we echo out t, our output will always be 1. It means our magic function construct is the one that's called. If it's visible in a class, it will always run before any functions with the same name as the class. So keep an eye on that. Now, what would happen in case we have both options but we set our construct to private? We're going to get that call to private test construct from invalid context. Now let's talk about best practices of classes and objects. I'm only going to give you 5 of them. This isn't meant to be in-depth best practices of anything really, but I do like to give you some best practices. So number 1, instead of assigning variable of the classes after creating an object, it is good to use the constructor. Okay. Use visibility as required. Do not make your variable and method either more secure or completely open. Over security will affect your flexibility, and under security will distrust your structure. Okay. 3, follow some convention in your classes and objects, like start all public methods with camel case, all protected methods with and variables variable prefix with underscore, etc. It will give you better visibility, easier to read. I tend to use nothing but camel case for everything. I don't find that it's hard for me to read at all. Now, do not try to do everything in a single class. Create a class very specific to your requirement. It will save you time and execution. If you remember only one thing from this video, please remember this. A class should do one thing and do it fabulously. And the 5th thing is always try to create every class in a separate file and follow some sort of naming convention. That's it for this video. Thank you for sticking around, and I hope you learned something through the course of it. As always, let me know what you think in the comments section below. Like and share the video and subscribe to our channel. You can check us out at chokehub.com. You can check us out on Facebook. You can check us out on Twitter. You can check us out on GitHub. And of course, if you're on IRC on the Freenode server, you can check us out in the ChokeHub channel. Again, I just want to thank you for watching the video. Have a great night, afternoon, or morning, whatever it is for you right now, and happy programming.